So, a rather epic gospel text for the day. When we read from the Gospel of John, we're often getting stories about Jesus that we don't get in the other Gospels. And when we look at this text in particular, there are a number of things that are irregular about it. I saw that a colleague of mine had commented that it's one of, if not the longest conversations that Jesus has with anyone. It's one of the longest conversations he has with anyone. It is this woman at the well. I was talking to somebody between services, and some weeks there are a set of texts that are kind of like a circle with no handles on it, and you're desperately trying to figure out which way to go. Then you get other Sundays where you've got this body of work here that has 157 handles on it, and it's not exactly sure which one to grab onto. But I want to walk through the text a bit this morning because there is a lot happening in the text that our 2014 eyes are not seeing, that we miss. Jesus and his disciples have gone into a Samaritan village. We usually think of Samaritans when we hear the story of the Good Samaritan, right? That's the reference that comes to our mind. In rural Indiana, where my people are from, the Samaritans might be referred to as shirt-tail relatives of the Jewish people. They were the Jewish people who were not carried off into captivity. And over generations and generations of marrying into different groups, their ethnic background became different, and their practice of the Jewish faith also became different. Now, those of you who grew up in Minnesota and other places like that know what the word different means, right? It means they're doing it wrong. So, Jesus goes into this town with his disciples. It's about noon. They're hungry. Jesus takes up a place at the well just outside of town while the disciples head into town to get food. And this woman comes out with her water jar to the well to get water. Why? Why is this woman getting water? I mean, we need water, of course. Well, let's rewind the tape just a little bit. It's noon. You do not get water at noon. That's just about the heat of the day. You don't go out from the town and labor in that hot sun and get water. Unless you have to. Unless you don't feel like you can go in the cooler part of the day when the other women are gathered getting water. If there's a sense that you don't feel welcome to go at that time. So you go in the heat of the day when nobody is going to be there so that you don't have to run into people. That's the woman who is getting water at noon who runs into Jesus. In our world, there are a lot of people who have to get water at noon. Sometimes it's us. Sometimes it's others. Sometimes it's the people that we walk by trying to observe their dignity while they get water at noon. But there are a lot of structures in our society and in this world that force people to get their water at noon. This morning in our little Lutherans class, we had donuts and coffee. Getting donuts at the 24-hour donut place in Palo Alto, yes, there is one. It may not be noon, but in many ways it is the noon crowd. The people who are out at times where they don't have to bump into other people. That's an important piece of this story. She's there to get water, like everyone else, but at a different time. She gets to the well, she's got her water jar, and then there's this guy there who says, "Give me some water to drink." Okay, why am I getting you water? The exchange is not rude. We might think of it as being kind of short in the text there. The biggest thing is that it's not appropriate for Jesus to be talking to this woman. It's not appropriate for Jesus to be talking to a woman, period. Let alone this woman who's there, did I mention, at noon, right? That woman, that kind of woman, a woman, not supposed to do that. Now, Jesus likes to do this sort of thing. He likes to go out and meet all the wrong people in all the wrong places. He's prone to doing that. It's awkward for him, and he could care less. But this woman who is coming to the well at noon, he's also placing a burden on her. Now there's some guy talking to her by the well. Is this something this woman needs? She already feels like she's got to come in the heat of the day to get water, and now she's got this guy talking to her, just going from bad to worse. And he wants water. Great. She kind of pushes back a little bit on him, which is fascinating. And we have this interchange, this dialogue that's going back and forth. The text is a little awkward in the Greek. He says, if you understood who was speaking to you, if you really understood who I was, you would be asking me for living water. Now, I'm thinking her first thought is, this guy has been in the sun too long. You know, if you knew how much of a rock star I was, you would be asking me for living water. We lose it in the Greek there. Living water, I think the translators got all excited that Jesus was doing something spiritual and threw out the word living. The text more implies like running water. We wouldn't look at a river and say, oh, there's living water. But that's the implication of the text. And they're looking at this well that was not running. And she's thinking, okay, so where are you getting this living water? Jesus begins to talk about how God is spirit, how there is going to be this water that bubbles up and rushes out. You will never have to come back to this well. You will never be thirsty again. She says, "Sir, I would like this water. I will never be thirsty again." And perhaps when we think about it, some of the saddest words in the New Testament, so that I never have to come back to this well again. There is a sense of that burden that we put on one another at times. The burden that we place on one another that makes life hard because life, I guess, is just too easy to start with. It may not be the same person every day. It may not be the same issue from place to place or month to month. But there is that burden, and that voice that comes to us over almost 2 millennia echoes that hurt and that burden. It's interesting then that Jesus, who frequently goes from one awkward topic to the next, invites her to bring her husband back to the well. Depending on the scholar you read, it can determine how you understand what's happening here. 5 husbands, what's going on? I think what we do know is that it's this reason, among others perhaps, that she's coming at noon. There is no sense that it is the woman's fault, but nonetheless, there she is. This idea of living water that we have, this idea of water that moves and sustains life, is a sense of a powerful force in creation. At the early service this morning, we baptized Christoph Gerka, and we hear the words of Martin Luther in the water prayer that is read, that we say together, that recites these stories of creation and how God's Spirit moved over the face of the deep. But we think today of the deep. We think today of the planes that are moving over the face of the deep in the South Indian Ocean. We think of the depths and the darkness of that water, the pain, the loss, this sense of force that is so mildly contained in that font. But we know that it reshapes continents and hides many things. But we also know that sense of living water, that nothing green survives without it, that we do not survive without it. And even though this may be a small piece of it, that washing and marking of that small boy, as for us, claims us with that power of creation and new life in a way that sustains us not just this day, but forever. There are some interesting things that happen at the end of the text here. The disciples show up in typically clueless fashion. You're not hungry now? Did somebody already get you something to eat? This is focus, guys. It's interesting that the woman leaves in this interchange. There's an awkwardness to it. The disciples don't want to interrupt, but at the same time they want to interrupt because this isn't right, Jesus. She leaves and rushes back to the town, leaving her water jar at the well. This whole agonizing trip that she makes every day, she has left that behind her. There is a sense in this text that she is in some ways the first sent one, or apostle, as it is used in Greek. It's interesting that we often talk about the first apostles as being other women, the women at the tomb that we will hear shortly in a few weeks. This woman heads out, and what does she do? We don't get that sense that halfway home she goes, "Oh, I forgot the water jar." We don't get that sense at all. We don't have the sense of her agonizing of, can I get back and get the water jar and get home before anybody else catches me while I'm out? No, that's not the text at all. All those people that have these strained relationships with her, those are the doors that she goes to say, you gotta see this guy. He's told me everything I've ever done. He knows me. This sense of respect that Jesus gives to her in this pretty lofty theological discussion, the sense of welcome and wholeness and acceptance and love, the sense that I'm glad I caught you at the well in the heat of the day, as opposed to voices that have said, you better go to the well after everyone else is gone. The people come out, they meet Jesus, and the word spreads from there. There's a lot in this text. Some of it we miss because of our distance culturally and time-wise. But there is a power in what this woman brings when she comes to the well. The power of living life under the burden of social pressure and judgment. Some days that's us. Some days, maybe in our silence, it's a pressure that we're putting on others. But in the midst of that awkward and painful moment, Jesus Christ is present in a way that engages us with open arms. And in the midst of that moment, we are marked in the waters of baptism in a way that claims us not just for today, but forever. That we too might return from where we've come and share the good news of the one who welcomed us when we were most burdened. Amen.